Hey guys, this is the video for Friday, January 29th, and it's on inverse trig functions, okay? So the whole idea here is instead of finding a trig value, they're going to give you a trig value and ask you to find the angle. For example, if I told you that the sine of a particular angle is -3/5, right? Well, the first thing you could do is you know that since the sine value is negative, it has to be in one of two quadrants rather. If I look at my little acronym all students take calculus, if sine is negative, it could be in quadrant 3 or 4, right? So that's the first thing that I want to recognize about this problem is the answer is not going to be unique. There's going to be more than one answer here. Even if I'm looking for only answers between 0 and 360, there's going to be two possible answers, a third quadrant angle and a second quadrant angle that has a sine value of -3/5. So that's the first thing you do. You figure out which quadrant it lies in. The next thing you do is you can find the reference angle. Now, the way I find the reference angle is I just take the inverse sine of both sides. I'm going to take the inverse sine of 3/5. Now, I could just find the inverse sine of -3/5, but sometimes that might be a little bit confusing because sometimes your calculator might give you a negative answer. So I just want to make sure that that I'm always getting a reference angle as an answer on my calculator. So I'm always just going to use the positive value. The negative is used to figure out which quadrants, and then I'm going to use the positive answer to find the reference angle. Because remember, any two angles that have the same reference angle have the same trig values, except possibly negative. So it doesn't matter if I use 3/5 or -3/5. My calculator is going to give me the same reference angle answer, but I want to make sure that it's not confusing and it actually is a reference angle when I use my calculator. So now I just use my calculator. So here's my calculator. You can use the Desmos graphing calculator online or a regular calculator, whatever. Regardless, you should make sure it's in degrees. So if I do mode, I can see this calculator is not in degrees, it's in radians. So I have to go down and change it to degrees, like that. And there. Okay, so now I just want to find the angle whose sine is 3/5. So that's second sine of 3/5. Okay, and then just press equals, and it gives me a reference angle. So maybe my calculator is asking me, or the delta math question is asking me to find the answer to the nearest tenth. So this would be 36.9 degrees to the nearest tenth. So the reference angle is 36.9 degrees. So then all I would have to do is find the third quadrant angle that has a reference angle of 36.9 and the fourth quadrant angle that has a reference angle of 36.9. Okay, so the third quadrant angle, like if I just think about that angle, if this angle right here is 36.9, then that angle is just going to be 180 plus 36.9. Okay, so on my calculator, if I take 180 plus, I could just do answer and get an answer, 216.9. That's going to be one answer, 216.9, if I want the answer to the nearest tenth. The other answer is the fourth quadrant angle with a reference angle of 36.9. So think about how you get that angle. If this angle is 36.9, then this angle right here is going to be 360 minus 36.9, right? So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take 360 minus 36.9. And the answer is 323.1. So that's all there is to it. All right, let's do another example. Suppose they're asking me to find the angle whose tangent is radical 7/3 or something. Okay, same process. I'm going to figure out which quadrants it's in. It could be in quadrant 1 or 3 in this case because tangent's positive. Then to find the reference angle, I'm going to take the inverse tangent of radical 7/3 on my calculator. Okay, so the angle whose tangent is radical 7 divided by 3. And in this case, I get 41.4. And again, make sure you pay attention to the directions. They might say the nearest degree. They might say the nearest tenth of a degree or hundredth of a degree. So pay attention. I'm just going to assume it's tenth, 41.4 degrees. So now I want a first quadrant angle. That one's easy. It's 41.4 degrees. And a third quadrant angle. So to find the third quadrant angle, I'm going to take 180 plus the reference angle. If I take 180 plus 41.4, I end up with 221.4. And that's all there is to it. Now, sometimes the answer might turn out to be a nice even number. That's okay. All right. Like, suppose I had something like, what if they said, like, find the angle whose tangent, how about this one? Tangent theta equals 0. Okay. So if the tangent is 0, if I use my calculator to just find the angle whose tangent is 0, the angle whose tangent is 0, I get a quadrantal angle, 0 degrees. So if I get a quadrantal angle, like 0 degrees, or if I get undefined or something like that, I know it's a quadrantal angle, then I can think about unit circle. I can say, well, if the tangent is 0, tangent sine over cosine, that means that the sine must be 0, right? Sine must be 0. Well, sine is 0 here and here. This point has coordinates negative or 0, 1, and this point has coordinates 0, -1. Oh wait, no, that's not. Those are points where cosine is 0. Oops. This point has coordinates 1, 0, and this point has coordinates -1, 0. So those are the 2 points that correspond to the sine being 0, 0 degrees and 180 degrees. So the answer would be 0 and 180. Okay, so if it ends up being a quadrantal angle that your calculator gives you, then you got to think about the unit circle or the graphs, right? I could have just done the graph. If sine is 0, which tangent 0 means that sine is 0. If sine is 0, I can tell that that corresponds to like these points: 0, 180, 360. Okay. What if it's an inverse or a reciprocal trig function? Like, for example, what if it was something like secant theta equals -2? Well, then all I would do here, I mean, I don't have a secant button on my calculator, but I do have sine, cosine, and tangent. So I would just change it into sine, cosine, and tangent. This is really saying that cosine theta is -1/2, right? It's the reciprocal function and the reciprocal value. And then you just do the same thing that we were doing before. So in this case, it would be all students take calculus. If cosine is negative, it has to be one of those 2 quadrants, right? So then I would just take, to find the reference angle, I'm going to find the angle whose cosine is +1/2, which this happens to be a nice angle. If I take the angle whose cosine is 0.5, it ends up being 60 degrees. So this is the reference angle, 60 degrees. So the second quadrant angle whose reference is 60 degrees would be 120. And the third quadrant angle whose reference is 60 degrees would be 240. So those would be the 2 answers. Okay, that's all there is to it. Enjoy your weekend. Just remember, we will be having a test next week on these basic trig. So it's going to be on Thursday, February 4th. It's going to be on everything we've done since the last test, which is just basic trig review. Okay, have a great weekend, and I'll see you Tuesday, hopefully. Remember, there's no students on Monday. It's a staff development day. All right, so I'll see you Tuesday. Bye, guys.